Okay, hello everybody. Today my aim is to show you lots of examples of public realm improvements in town centres post-2000, a kind of state of the nation audit, if you like. I've been on the Towns Alive board for over 10 years, and during that time I led the transformation of two key spaces in Stamford in Lincolnshire. That's Red Lion Square before and afterwards, and then Sheep Market. And I'm now doing a PhD at Westminster, focusing on the implementation of quality streetscape in market towns. I must admit I was quite intrigued to read the email discussion of the Urban Design Group yesterday on the subject of quality. I don't think they came up with any definitive answer, and I'm not at all surprised because that's something that I've been working on for at least the last 3 years. So now I'm going to show you public realm improvements which have all been offered as exemplars. So perhaps you might ask yourself as we go through, to what degree do they demonstrate quality in street design? It's worth remembering that all these photographs were taken in the last few months, so over the winter. They aren't actually all showing community events in full flow, which it's a constant surprise that every single picture I've ever seen practically of public realm shows happy people in markets spending their money. So here we go. The first place, Baldock, like Stamford, grew up on the Great North Road, is a historic through route and has a very wide town road running through the centre of the town. BDP designed this award-winning scheme, and it's a comprehensive treatment of the whole town centre. And what I think is particularly transferable to other places is the way that they've carved out smaller spaces within the centre of the town to provide focal points for activity. However, I do wonder if more could have been done perhaps to reduce the dominance of the road in that particular place. Turning now to Beverley, those of you who know Beverley know that it has two central spaces linked by the main pedestrian street with the shops on. This is the larger of the two. It's called the Saturday Market, and they're currently putting in the new paving. And the plan is to reduce car parking from 158 spaces. They're mostly beyond that, the square opens up, down to 120 spaces. So you can see the pedestrian area that they created around the market cross, so why they allowed those two car spaces in that single pedestrian area, I'm not quite sure. The Wednesday Market is a smaller space, and I think it demonstrates a more successful balance perhaps between parking and people. It does appear, and I don't know the details, but the earlier more radical plans were dropped for the Saturday Market as a result of local opposition, the removal of car parking always being, as Chris says, a very contentious point. Whether that was the right decision will remain to be seen, especially as they're building a 200,000 square foot retail leisure scheme with its own parking, the other side of the Minster, which will compete with the town centre. Bishop Auckland, this scheme provides a large area for activities outside the town hall here, and they remove the car parking from this space. They've also integrated it very well in the link that runs down to the Bishop's Palace in the town, so quite a different approach there. Boston, there are several Lincolnshire examples in my slides, not really because it's an area that I live in, but because I think that Lincolnshire is unusual, possibly unique, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I'd love to know, in that it has a streetscape design manual for the county, and its use is now mandatory. So Boston has a massive marketplace where the in-house Lincolnshire design team attempted a shared space scheme, and they reduced the car parking in the space from 110 spaces to 40. There you can see a small market that was in operation the day I went, but I think they do use it for wider, more markets on other days. But you can see that I think shared space has been a bit of a problematic issue in such a large market square because they've had to introduce the temporary wooden planters. Here is a small town in north-east Lincolnshire, a place I must confess I'd never heard of before I heard about the scheme and went to visit it. It's a small town with a very big idea, and I don't know how it came onto their agenda, but you have to admire their ambition. It was designed by Bowman Lyons, and you can see that even in a cold Wednesday afternoon in February, the youth of Crowell on the previous slide were congregating and using the area for skateboarding, and the fountains certainly attracted the youngsters, so that was great. Now I've included devices because it's a Cape exemplar and it's often quoted. It's a Colin Davis scheme, and the aim was to declutter, reorder and provide better bus provision. However, I wouldn't want the community to stop at this, because perhaps the works could now move on, see them as the first phase and deal with the tarmac and the cars, which on a non-market day seem quite overwhelming. This is Durham, a McGregor Smith design, which has rationalised the space using the slope well, I think, and provides much more seating than there was before. The central statue was recited, and that was very controversial, and I think it looks fabulous in its new position. The scheme didn't really rebalance the relationship between traffic and people, because the marketplace was essentially a vehicle-free area, but they didn't have the traffic lights, which they've had to reintroduce because of fears of safety, which I think is a bit of a shame. Here's Gainsborough, another Lincolnshire scheme designed by BDP, and it provides a largely car-free, pedestrian-friendly space, with all the car parking that used to be in the marketplace being completely removed. This scheme was created as a response to a big edge of town retail scheme called Marshall's Yard, which when it opened had a huge impact on the trade in the town centre. Sadly, Gainsborough isn't a particularly affluent town, and there are still quite a few empty shops, as you can see. But recently they've improved the pedestrian links between the town centre and Marshall's Yard, which may help to redress the balance. Here is another of the Lincolnshire in-house design schemes, and they've taken out nearly 50 car parking spaces from the marketplace. It's actually part of a larger scheme which extends to the railway station, and it's within the heart of the town's conservation area, so not actually the prime high street area, and they want to see the marketplace used for more events in the square. Arguably, I think they could have downgraded the road or removed it altogether, but they're just about to put in an east-west link bypass, and it is possible they might revisit that. Hebden Bridge, a multi-award winning scheme funded by Yorkshire Forward, who as an RDA was very active in market towns and their promotion, but I think this was the only scheme which really received substantial funding for public realm works. It's certainly a town which revels in its distinctiveness, and I think the scheme enhances that. Here is another Hamilton Bailey scheme. Sorry, we haven't come to this. This is the first Hamilton Bailey shared space scheme, which links the town centre with the new 300,000 square foot edge of town shopping centre currently being built. I think that's quite forward-thinking and perhaps differs somewhat from Beverley, and it's a significant factor, I think, that Hereford actually has a streetscape strategy, which isn't something that I found in smaller towns. I have to say these photographs were taken on a Sunday, so it does look particularly desolate, so that's why. Kettering, another award-winning scheme designed by Savills, and it's on the edge of town and shows, I think, brilliantly how to work with the topography and provide space for activities. The other successful thing about this is that those 3 buildings that you can see there that enclose the space are actually completely new. That was an empty part of the town, and there had originally been buildings there, but not for many years. So they kind of enclosed the space very successfully and tried to use it for different uses. Although the next phase is to extend the scheme into the rest of the town, which sorely needs it. Turning now to Nelson, this is also an award-winning scheme in an old industrial town where the town centre has been hollowed out really by huge out-of-town retail warehouse plots and massive supermarkets that surround it. But the town centre does have a number of other functions, such as the council offices and cultural venues, and they have done some beautiful planting, successfully integrated some of the car parking, and in this slide you can see how they tried to tackle what they called old-style pedestrianisation. So I presume that there was no through route previously, and it was quite a big space, but no active frontages along this side at all, which I think must have been quite threatening at night. And I presume that the deliveries to the back of this scheme came along there anyway. So quite an interesting one. You don't see that so often.
Could I just ask, seats in the middle of the cycleway?
No, I think the cycleway is actually on the road. Can you see there's just a bit painted on the road?
Oh, I see.
Yeah, yeah. Yes, that would be quite novel, wouldn't it? Yeah. Keep you on your toes, so certainly. Okay, Poynton, this is the other Hammant and Bailey scheme, and it has received a lot of attention, really because of the way it has handled a large volume of traffic through quite a tricky junction. In fact, according to a website I was reading, it's the busiest in Cheshire, if you can imagine such a thing. Anyway, in terms of learning lessons from the public realm, I think Park Lane, which runs down from one of those roundabouts, is a neighbourhood linear street which has been upgraded in a very sympathetic and successful way, I think. Okay, now last couple of places. Saffron Walden. This has been completely repaved, and on a non-market day, I think that the cars are dominating the space, and I think it's really a wasted opportunity. And I fear that that is the kind of scheme that you can see people think in towns that cars are so important to bring them there, but the benchmarking shows that 50% of people who come into town walk. So I don't know. Wellington, I included this because it actually did win an Action for Market Towns award, not because of the paving, which has been redone, but because they wanted to increase the use of the town centre, and they saw that as key to it. But I think that they renovated an existing 1960s pedestrianised space, and I think it really is a problem that 1960s pedestrianised areas are going to be needing to be improved, and if there's no design input, then you're just going to get exactly the same as there was before, which is a wasted opportunity. So the key question when you saw those slides, how much did those examples, bearing in mind they're the exemplars, lift your spirits, set your heart alight? Well, it's debatable, isn't it? Turning to the question on the slide, I'd say there were two main areas to consider that are specific to towns. First of all, the complexity of the political environment. Often there are 3 tiers of government. That's the county, district and town councils. Although I was quite surprised when I looked back through my slides and realised that half of the examples are now unitary authorities, which is significant because by far the majority of rural areas are still in shire counties. That isn't to say that the works would have been done while they're unitary, because that's a relatively new thing, but obviously they were a different kind of organisation. So the complexity also around the real issue in towns about representational versus participative democracy and who can decide. And I think there's an assumption that communities are very small and simple, but actually that's not at all true. They have diverse needs. There's also a natural conservatism and resistance to change, and I think the other side of the coin to that is that they also have great pride in their place and a sense of ownership, if you like. The second factor I think to remember when you're thinking about towns is that the case for urban design isn't understood. And, you know, Jan Gehl's message, which if you saw the film here last week about encouraging life on the streets, it's just not being taken out outside cities. There might be 2 issues connected with that: the poverty ambition at community level, and I think that's one of the reasons why it's really important to build up a bank of these smaller schemes in smaller places, so that we aren't always talking about New Road Brighton, however fabulous that might be. And also, you know, alterations to the public realm tend to be, you know, once in a generation transformations in each of these places, which, you know, it does have problems about transferability of expertise and the fact that that expertise often falls within different parts of local authorities. Finally, there was some research done on the Market Towns Health Check, which is a process which the government sponsored, and the top 2 issues were traffic and the town's environment and the deficiencies thereof. So street design in market towns certainly is important. Okay, thank you.